Leap Forward is brought to you by Bridge Academy, an accredited CPD partner of the Institute of the Motor Industry. Bridge Academy is a learning platform helping people upskill for the industries that power the world, from EV and fleet management to sustainability and technology. Bridge Academy makes accredited learning accessible, engaging, and ready for real-world application. Because the future belongs to those who never stop learning. Visit bridgelt.com to explore more. Today on Leap Forward, we welcome Elspeth Briscoe, CEO of Learning with Experts, leading an award-winning global platform that combines experts with small online classrooms. Elspeth shares her journey from leadership roles at eBay and Skype to the EdTech space, now intensely focused on changing human behaviours, not just providing content. She also shares her views on using AI for efficiency alongside human empathy and key advice for leaders and female founders. Hello and welcome to the Leap Forward podcast. This is the show where we explore the ideas and people and tech that shapes the future of how we live, we work and we learn. And today I'm really delighted to be joined by someone who's been reimagining education for the digital age. Elspeth Briscoe is the founder and CEO of Learning with Experts. They are an award-winning global learning platform. They combine world-leading experts with small online classrooms and communities, whether that's from gardening, which we'll talk a little bit about, I'm sure, and photography to business and health. But Elspeth had a career before that, and a very impressive one. She had leadership roles at eBay, Skype, The Guardian, and she's definitely one of the leading voices in the global EdTech movement. So, Elspeth, it's a real pleasure to have you on the Leap Forward podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks, Justin.
So for those that are new to Learning with Experts, why don't you start with a bit of an overview? What is it and what problem does it solve?
Yeah, of course. So, Learning with Experts is a digital classroom, and we've come up with a new way of learning for people who are learning in the digital environment, but at scale. Um, and we are different from other digital learning providers because a US VC once described us as the soup to nuts of digital education, which I kind of like because it's a deliberate stance on our part. We have an interactive classroom, so people learn in small groups in communities, and that's a really important part of what we do. And those classrooms can be replicated at scale, so millions of people can learn simultaneously. So, for me, in short, our differentiator is that we change human behaviors based on really, really high quality digital education.
And what inspired you to build a business that I suppose brings together that soup to nuts of expert teachers, amazing kind of online learning experiences, and that real, I suppose, human connection?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think I've been inspired actually by a lot of the people that I've worked with previously, but the companies I've been immersed in. So companies like eBay and Skype, and certainly the elements that I've been involved in, ironically, they're technology companies, but they're actually all about people, and the connections that people make in the digital world and how we interact with one another. So I think I was inspired by being able to see what people could achieve when they were put together in small networks. So at eBay, it was all around the kind of feedback system where people trusted each other and gave people marks, if you like. And at Skype, it was about that instant connection visually, often with people as well as through audio. And I kind of see this as the next paradigm shift, really, if you like, that people have real physical communities, but actually, what the internet is really, really great at is creating like minded communities of people who want to solve a problem together. And fast forward kind of 10 years almost, and we're starting to use that for the things that society really needs to solve, like health problems, like educating itself around problems around our planet. So, in its greatest level, sort of what's inspired me, I suppose, is back to people again. It's the people in these great disruptive technology companies who taught me that you can use tech to make humans even greater than they are.
And you mentioned those companies, and really great sort of insights and parallels there, I suppose, that you've applied just to build the business. But tell me a little bit about sort of how those roles, I suppose, led you to becoming a female founder, I suppose, and your kind of entrepreneurial outlook.
Yeah, so let's start on the female founder thing because actually when I started there weren't many of us. And it's no coincidence that the CEO of eBay at the time when I was there was a lady called Meg Whitman, who was, I think, very ahead of her time and very
Yeah,
advanced actually, in the terms of how she ran a company. So it was really very, very equality based. Inclusion and diversity were not even talked about that much because they were so embedded in the culture, and being led by a woman. Clearly, she was a great role model, and I was very privileged to sort of get to know her a little bit. So that was a big influence for me. I'd come out of that environment where it really was very progressive, and I'd spent some time in Silicon Valley as well. And then coming back into being a startup, and really you go out by yourself. And yes, I had some great connections, particularly in the kind of developer world. Um, but what really surprised me actually was how much in the financial world there isn't that equality, and still not even yet. So there's a statistic that many people will know, but some people won't. But only 2% of funding, VC funding, goes to women founders. And there's been a huge amount of noise about that in the last couple of years, and it is changing a little bit. But that statistic still stands true. So despite all of the messaging out there, actually cash and deal flows are not really coming to women founders yet. And I've had a lot of conversations actually with Innovate UK about this. And we've won 2 Innovate UK grants to the tune of 500,000, which is again unusual. And I do think there is a groundswell of people who want to change this. But my experience as a founder has been, and we now have a significant number of people on our cap table. We only have 1 or 2 women investors. The investment community is still largely um, really led by quite a select group demographic. So I truly try, and now I'm trying to live and breathe the that kind of diversity ethic that we saw at the early progressive tech companies like eBay. And we're just going through a funding round, as Justin mentioned. I'm pleased to say that we are getting some more women investors into that round. Um, and also, I'm playing an active part on the panel with Innovate UK. But it's definitely a glass ceiling that still needs to be smashed, I would say.
and for those listening, watching, just sort of just where is, you just mentioned fundraising there. Just give us a picture of kind of where is learning with experts today, and then perhaps just sort of describe some of those kind of pivotal moments that have defined your kind of path to where you are today.
Yes. So yeah, we are just going through a funding raise. We've raised around 10 million during our lifespan as a business. And we're kind of a business with two halves of the story, if you like. We started off as a B2C business, so direct to consumer, like a lot of tech consumer businesses, quite hungry on marketing spend using that kind of model. But what happened was we were pulled through to being a B2B company. So I touched on healthcare a little bit earlier, but one of our tutors, Professor Samir Gray, recognized what we'd built and said, I think this is going to be very significant in healthcare. And I just want to touch on him for a second because he's an important part of our journey. So he was a teacher for us, teaching people about well-being. And he taught a course called Live Longer Better. He was the former chief knowledge officer for the NHS, and he was also the person who introduced breast cancer screening to this country. And I know him really well now. We speak every other day. And he said at the time he was introducing breast cancer screening, which is now, of course, has saved millions of lives, no one was interested. So he is categorically a disruptor, and someone who is kind of really amazing at innovative change. So he was teaching through our B2C platform, simply direct to consumer, course called Live Longer Better. He had a light bulb moment and said, actually, I think the NHS really needs this. it's really important in healthcare because the way that we teach, back to that really high quality production values that we have on video and filming, combined with people learning in groups, actually changes health outcomes. And we now have data that illustrates that. So thousands of people have been through NHS trusts learning this Live Longer Better course. Several of them, well, thousands of them with 2 comorbidities. Several trusts have experimented with this. And they come out with a 20% better health outcome when they've done the Live Longer Better course. So for Professor Samuel Gray, this has changed our journey as a business, basically. He introduced us to the healthcare sector in general, and now working with the Mayo Clinic, the largest health educator in the world, 19 billion in revenue, teaching people all over the world. We work with BBC Maestro. We're working with a company called Newson Health on menopause, a company called Connect Health. 4,000 people a year are referred to Connect Health by the NHS, and hundreds of thousands of people who experience persistent pain. So all of this to answer your question, Justin, about our journey, like many startups, we're not now where we started out thinking we were going to be. We started out in, as you mentioned at the beginning, horticulture, working with the RHS, which we still do, working with some of the big names in horticulture like Pete Aldoff and Chris Beardshaw, working with people like Raymond Blanc and Michelle Roux in cooking. And we still do all of these straight to consumer courses, an important part of our business. But the really explosive bit has been this B2B pivot. And that's back to the fundraising piece, why we've been on this journey of fundraising. So we did rounds of angel fundraising at getting towards our pivot. And a couple of people have said to me, actually, we've done the largest amount of money in angel fundraising they've ever seen. I've yet to have that corroborated, but because of our journey, we've had a very supportive shareholder base who's taken us right through to this space.
Wow. I mean, that's a really impressive backing, I suppose, of you and the team, and I suppose the kind of the proposition, and I can see and hear, the kind of impact that what you're doing now in that pivot, is having on not just people's lives, enabling them to live longer and better, but also, I suppose, on the institutions and organizations that are providing that healthcare. The NHS massively constrained in terms of the demand on its services, and budgets, and the challenges of finding those budgets. I mean, these are fundamental things. This is more than just sort of being an edtech business.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge thing. And don't get me wrong, like, again, like all founders, the EdTech business, the path has not been always smooth. There are absolutely challenges and a roller coaster ride, if you like. And so, our most recent round is difficult. We've got an incredible result at the end, and we've got the majority of our shareholders being supportive, but we've compromised on various things, and it's a difficult environment to raise in. So we're very, very lucky on that. But the reason that we're able to do what we are, and the NHS, you're right, is budget constrained. It's in a difficult situation. I think most people are aware of that. But what they see us as doing is actually an important part of their infrastructure. So they're wanting to put us onto the NHS app with 50 million people, patients coming through, to do these digital education courses in topics like living longer better. So topics like diabetes type 2 and obesity are world problems which we're experiencing. They're lifestyle related issues that people could address through their own behaviours. And so some of the real smart people within the NHS have looked at now preventative education as part of the 10-year plan for how they can support our population going forward. And if you think about the NHS spending 10 billion a year on diabetes type 2 medication, that's an entirely preventable disease. And
Wow.
so you can see people who are perhaps pre-diabetic, have got high blood sugar, put them on an educational course that we know works with a group of other people. So they're very motivated and they've got that emotional support. with a top dietitian who we've now got from the Mayo Clinic, where they're more advanced than us in the US because they've had obesity and diabetes for a long time. And people are going to come out of those regional bubbles, if you like, those little classes with their NHS trusts with better health outcomes. So the NHS recognised that actually this is not just a really important infrastructure technology for them to embrace. It already has proof points, but it's going to save them a lot of money too. So it's all of those goals in one. That's why it's super attractive. And we're lucky to have incredible sponsor, Dr. Pani Sissu, who's going live in Hertfordshire NHS region with 11 different courses. So we're covering dementia, diabetes type 2, obesity. We're doing stuff with pre and postnatal. That's an really interesting program. So we have we're working with a company called the Mindful Birth Group, who are like kind of an innovative NCT, if you like. And it was shocked me to hear that the biggest killer of new mothers is suicide. And that's because we still haven't really supported that group of people through the phase of having children. And people are still expected to go to kind of drafty village halls to go and learn from an old PowerPoint presentation about how you look after your kids. Now, if you're suffering from postnatal depression, there's no way you're going to do that. But you might well join a digital group, especially if you've been to your GP who says, actually, I think education is going to help you more than me doling out pills for you. And so that was one of our Innovate grants, actually. And we're really pushing the boundaries of technology around that by looking at sentiment analysis in the classroom. So we can predict, based on language, how people are feeling once they've had their baby. And if there are red flags around that, we can push them back out into real life where they can see their GPs, their midwives, and actually sort of help on that journey as well. So we see ourselves as an impact business as well as a kind of more than 10x return investor attractive proposition in technology being a disruptor. And I realize that when you asked me a question, I'm now taking on quite a full journey. But
It's brilliant.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll interrupt you if I
yeah,
felt
please,
like I needed
yeah,
to.
yeah,
And on the back of the 20% number that you quoted in terms of outcome, right? And I guess that's sort of like that's the net effect, the net result of kind of learning with you, I suppose. Tell me a little bit about, and I love the sentiment piece, and I want to get more into the technology as we go on this conversation. But how would you describe the principles that sort of really differentiate your model from sort of like the tradition? I mean, you talked about PowerPoints and sort of old school kind of learning, but how do you differentiate your model from traditional online learning?
yeah. So it's a great question. So really, back to this kind of soup to nuts of education, we are deliberately giving people an immersive and very sticky experience in a group situation of learning. So one of the problems that I had originally when I set up the company and looked at what else was going on in the online learning world was that people tended to either be content providers or they were what is often referred to as an LMS platform or some kind of software platform where you put content onto it.
So that's like a learning management system for anyone listening.
Yeah, an LMS system, that kind of thing. There are different terminologies that people use, or often homegrown software. The issue with that, and also this, I think this comes back to my background a little bit as well, is about the user experience. So if you come into a platform where there's been content that's just been put onto it, it's not a very seamless experience. You feel like you're in a kind of shell or a house. That has no cohesiveness in the journey that you're being taken on with the content that you're viewing. So it's quite disjointed. Also, and this is a really important point for us, you tend to study alone. Or not always now, but that if you're looking at pure content providers, like for example, Masterclass or BBC Maestro, these are like Netflixes where you study the watch a film, but 80% of people still drop out of that. So it's more like TV viewing. So if you're in earnest about trying to change human behavior, that's not really the way to do it, particularly in the health environment. If you combine really high quality content, and I've learned a lot about this from our head of production. So let's take the high quality content for a minute by itself. you can go a long way through incredible storytelling and really great visuals. So we had someone who was ex Channel 4 production, who had a deep understanding of being able to tell high quality storytelling. And these, our camera crew had been out in kind of war zones, etc. So you can digest an enormous amount of information and bottle it and put it out to your audience in a very cohesive way. So that's the content piece. But if you combine that with people in a group who are learning from each other as well as an expert, there's a piece around learning from the community. um, you actually start to get that alchemy of creating a really secret sauce within a classroom, because it's the discussion between the classmates as well as the teacher. And there's one other point as well, and that's that we make people go away and do things. So instead of just being sat at your laptop, and of course it's important for health as well, we set assignments. So you go away, you might keep a food diary, or you might go and do some exercise, you come back, report to your classmates. And the very act of interacting with someone else, who maybe you've never met before, makes you invested in that process. And there are many other companies who have some level of interaction or some piece in the classroom. I don't see anyone else, and we're told this, who's doing all of this. So the great storytelling, great production values, interaction within the classroom, small groups, assignments, experts there who you wouldn't normally get access to. All of that combined gives a kind of secret sauce and really pushes the boundaries of EdTech, I think.
And you mentioned it earlier, but I'd love to kind of expand more around sort of how you're embracing kind of emerging technology. Obviously, you've got to get the balance right, and it sounds like you're very focused on ultimately the kind of human and the learner experience. But got to mention AI, adaptive learning, data and analytics. How are these things changing the landscape, and how are you, I suppose, in a sense, embracing them?
Yeah, and I get asked this quite a lot, and was actually during our recent investment rounds. So for me, I love AI. I think it's phenomenal. I think it's also dangerous, but I think it's phenomenal if it's put to the right use, right? So AI, we view as a tool that makes us more efficient as humans. So what I like to think about is AI increasing our efficiency and the humans bringing human empathy. And when you combine those two things, because AI notoriously can't have empathy, and this is important in our classrooms, right? So if you combine the efficiency of AI with the empathy of the human being and put them into a small community, again, I think that's a very powerful combination. So we are really embracing AI, and we're making our teachers more efficient. For example, if there are repeat questions, it's not good use of human to just keep repeating the same answer. So we'll use technology to help with that. We use, as I talked about earlier, sentiment analysis to understand quite quickly a shortcut to how people are feeling in the classroom, but then rerouting them on pathways into different routes within the medical healthcare system. But at the heart of all this is a human group, who empathize with one another in particularly difficult situations around healthcare, which you need if you're, a new mother, an elderly person who is lonely, someone suffering from dementia, or if you're kind of the only person in your village, for example. We've talked to people who have been amputees. Um, Across the world, there are thousands, millions of these people, but they might not geographically be located near someone they can talk to. So AI is important for us. I think another aspect of it that we are starting to examine quite closely is around simulation, particularly in the medical world. You can immerse people into environments for trainings that you wouldn't want to put them in real life. This isn't new news, though. I mean, people have been doing this in aerospace and kind of quite advanced medical fields for a long time. Open heart surgery training, for example. But if you could, a lot of what we do is putting all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together in one spot. So if we start to plug in the great stuff that's happening in AR and VR into our classroom, which now has that kind of really robust scalability, and the curriculum behind it, the ability to film, starts to tie all of those pieces together, which back to that soup to nuts of education.
How is that experience going to continue to evolve? And I guess sort of linked to that is, we have, two kind of three generations, kind of, but growing up, completely kind of native. How will the next generation learn differently?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think one of the things that again, which AI will come in and be really helpful in this is recognizing that not all humans learn in the same way. So we've had some very interesting conversations recently around neurodiversity, and about how some brain wirings have the need to be able to see visual things and work at a slightly different pace than other people. So they'll need to see visual, have a break, go back. So there's a whole pedagogical piece around how different people learn, how people learn with dyslexia, with different neurodiversities, and actually, um, I think what will happen is education will become slightly more tailored to those different brain types. Um, I I think we've been and speaking to actually quite a number of the professors at Oxford University, we're based in Oxford. When you speak to them individually, it's interesting because there is a combined story here that it's absolutely astonishing that we've continued with this kind of route learning methodology of teaching people that was sort of essentially from the Roman times, where you have one person stood up and then a load of people in a classroom
What have the
trying
Romans ever done for us?
well, quite a lot, which is probably why it's lasted this long. But I think we can improve on the interactivity and the kind of sensitivity around different groups of people and how they learn. And I think it will become a lot easier for people who are a bit more diverse. I've got three children going through the classical education system, and some people are good at exams, and I actually think the necessity to be good at exams will become a thing of the past, because you don't need to be good at exams anymore.
You've given me the perfect segue there. Thank you. Because we all bandy about this term lifelong learning. But it's, you've just kind of provided kind of one example of kind of why and how we need to kind of change our thinking about, the journey we're all going to go on through our lives, I guess, right? So what role do you see for lifelong learning in preparing people for, this future world that we're all going to live in?
So I think lifelong learning is going to play a big part in health, actually, which is obviously why we're in this place. So when we see people going through the Learning with Experts platform, who are in their 80s and 90s, really benefiting from it. I think that lifelong learning bit really hits through. It's so weird that we kind of think, oh, we'll go to school and then university and stop learning when we're in our 20s. I mean, why would you do that? That's such a strange thing as a human to just think, I'm not going to learn anything anymore. But if you've got an urgency around your learning because you're sick, and other people can't help you necessarily, then that becomes a real kind of life-changing thing for our society. And I think this lifelong learning thing is going to become more and more important for society globally. There are certain urgent topics like climate change being one, which we've barely scratched the surface of as a business. But when there's suddenly an urgency, and you can teach people en masse to change their behavior through education, this sort of thing becomes incredibly powerful, and it becomes really powerful, I think, in healthcare and in the environment, which are two of the big issues of our time.
Just going back to you for a minute. Um, Tell me a little bit about sort of, I guess, on reflection, some of the biggest lessons you've learnt yourself as a female founder scaling this business.
Yeah, so one of my big lessons is hiring the right people. So I've got that very right and very wrong at times. So I have the most incredible CTO, who's effectively now my co-founder. Um, and hiring someone good in that position is just, life changing, that you've got a kind of partner you can share everything with, and we complement each other, and not in the kind of praising kind of way, the other compliment. But it's so key to have people around you who A are different from you and B have really strength in skills. And I'd just say the same about our head of production, our engineering team. So hiring. I haven't got it right all the time though, and people always say, act quickly when you don't get it right. Uh, I don't think in the past I've been brilliant at that, but I've learned from that. So yeah, and waiting and being patient. Like there are certain people in the team that I knew instantly we wanted to be in the team, and we've waited for them, and it's taken time. So that piece has been a big learning. I think the other learning for me is just being so adaptable to change, because I think our world is changing very quickly. It's changing economically, it's changing, all the things that we talked about with health. Um, and so you don't necessarily know what's around the corner. So, whilst I have a very clear vision for the business, I think if the external world changes around us, you have to adapt to that. So, I think I've really learned about that. And I think the other thing that I've learned, frankly, is that I'm going to say cash is queen, not cash is king. Um, but I should have probably gone out, and I couldn't have done at the time, by the way, especially being a female founder. But I should have probably gone out 10 years ago and raised 10 million in one chunk. Um, and that it's quite distracting doing fundraisers regularly. And now, touch wood, we're in a position where we won't be doing that a lot. But I think that's a big learning for me.
Thank you for being so honest. It's really good to hear those reflections. You talked about the team there. Tell me a little bit about sort of how you as a leader go about, I suppose, culture and kind of cultivating, creativity, resilience, and purpose in your team.
Yeah, I mean, culture is massively important to me. And when, again, I'm going to quote Meg Whitman on this, because eBay created a very different culture at the time. We did have quite flexible working. We had remote working ahead of other people. Uh, we really looked after our people well in terms of their environment. And all of the and there's the diversity inclusion piece. All of those things I really try and replicate, and a real culture of listening and understanding people. Um, I would say that we have been quite progressive in the terms of our flexibility of remote working, which is now the norm, but didn't used to be. So, a good example is in COVID, we didn't skip a beat. Like everyone was kind of like, "Oh, should we move off it? Oh, what are we doing?" We literally within a week had the team together and we did everything remotely. Our production team had figured out a way to remote film. In fact, the whole of our Michelle Roux course was filmed with no contact between people at all. We sent him a kit. It was so that cultural piece around uh, flexibility and flexibility of understanding that everyone's grown-ups. And I think at the heart of that for me is a bit underlying the principle of our community classroom as well. And some of the other companies I've worked at is around trust. If you've hired the right people and you've got a good framework in there and you trust people, they do an amazing job. And they also stick with you. So we have a really good track record of uh, people staying with the company. So yeah.
And you talked about it being a difficult fundraising environment. We've talked about sort of AI and the pace of change at the moment. So, what sort of advice would you give to an entrepreneur looking to kind of build a mission driven business today?
I would say read the book called Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, which is a phenomenal read, and there are many others as well. There's also a book called by David Soskin, who's one of our shareholders, called Net Profits. I read a lot. Um, Learn from other entrepreneurs who've made it, not from, dare I say it, the investment community or other kind of people who think they know what the statistics are. Because if you really want to do it, you will. You find a way. You find a way through, and sometimes you have to kiss a lot of frogs. And people don't realize how many frogs sometimes, I think.
I like that. So find a moment of real challenge, I suppose, and it may even be, you know, a failure, right? That taught you something lasting about leadership.
I think some of the times where I've had to make the team smaller, and had to let people go that I didn't necessarily want to. Uh, it's taught me that whilst leadership is incredibly rewarding, it's also quite brutal. So I think I've learnt more on that side over the years than I was necessarily expecting to. And I mean brutal in a personal way because you carry that with you. Um, but it's also very necessary for the success of the business. So sometimes you have to take really tough choices that you don't want to take. And I'm just being really honest here, but I think that's a lesson in leadership. That to be a really good leader, you have to be the person that takes those choices. And actually, I'm going to give you an example from a conversation I had this morning with one of my leadership team who said, when I've got a difficult decision to make, I know I can always call you up and you'll decide for me. And then I don't have to make that decision. And I kind of think that's it. That buck stops with me. And we are a very discursive team, as I said. Uh, but those lessons about the tough decisions come to the leader. I think that's been a learning for me.
I think that's a really, really honest answer, and I really appreciate it. I'm going to ask you a few quick fire questions now. So, what I want you to do is kind of say the first thing that comes into your head, okay? All right. So, if you could instantly master any skill, what would it be?
Oh, I'm going to give you a live example, if I may. So I'm learning the piano. I started
Are you
two
going to
years.
start playing on this?
I would do. I've literally just bought a baby grand which is being restored. I did my grade 5 last year and I'm going to do grade 8 this year. And I have the most amazing teacher. So back to the teachers.
Uh, and on the teacher point, and you've got a lot of them already on the platform, but who would be your dream guest or teacher to host on Learning with Experts?
Yeah. So I think I'm not a religious person. And in fact, I'm quite the opposite. So I think I'd invite Jesus, just to sort of so I could interrogate him.
I love it. Yeah. You've already mentioned two, but are there any other books or podcasts that have really influenced how you think?
Yeah, there are many, but actually, there's a couple of books which are fiction books which have stayed with me, and I've just literally been going through my bookshelves, moving house. The one I recommended to my kids is a book called Papillon, which is it's a story really, and I've noticed there is a theme here about triumph over adversity. And there's also another book called The Power of One, which is similar, but different. I do love books, and Shoe Dog, I should have explained if you don't know it, is about the story of the founder of Nike. Um, but these are all people who've done exceptional things against the odds. Um, and I would, if you're a founder, you probably have that hardwired DNA anyway. But I would definitely read those because they're really encouraging. Podcasts, clearly, I love this one. There are a number of others. I sometimes watch Stephen Bartlett, Lewis Howes, those kind of people. I quite like looking at what's going on in the States. Um, so yeah.
Great. Um, and if you could teleport anywhere to learn something new, where would you go?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this one. I'd actually quite like to go into one of the indigenous tribes in the Amazon, or around the area where you can no longer go. And there are a surprising number. I think there are 800 or more tribes that are considered to be untouched, and now kind of humans like us can't go and see them because very quickly they don't have the immunity that we do, so they're at severe risk. But as this is conceptual, I think I would like to go and immerse myself.
And would you do that? That's a really great point. Would you do that as a fly on the wall? As in, would it be more kind of observational in terms of trying to understand how they teach, how they learn, or is it more like kind of actually immersing in terms of the cultural side of things?
Yeah, no, I want to go in there and experience it.
That's really interesting. And your go-to song when you need to focus or reset?
Yeah, so I like the Brook violin concerto. I like a really eclectic mix of music. I like both current and classical, but that one always gets me every time.
Love it. That's a brilliant way to end this conversation. Elspeth, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for coming on Leap Forward.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks for having me.